62.9% of accepted full-time offers came through school-facilitated activities. That statistic matters more than headline salary because it tells you where the real access lives. What are you paying for in the context of even just thinking about this post-MBA experience? I am Susan Vereshai, founder of C Admissions, for those who are new. We work with high-achieving professionals who are thinking seriously about whether an MBA belongs in their career plan. Before we dive in more details, I would encourage you to subscribe to our channel. You'll be notified about events and activities that we'll be hosting. So let's dive right in. The "is an MBA worth it" debate produces a lot of the same recycled answers every single cycle. I see these constantly when I read articles that are posted out there. They're looking at median salaries, they're looking at placements, they're looking at rankings. And candidates in the research phase pick up that data and try to apply it to their particular situation, which doesn't always fit. And it's really difficult as a first-time applicant going through this process to know why it doesn't fit for you specifically. Part of what's happening is the definition itself. The blogs and think pieces making the "an MBA is not worth it" case are almost always describing the full-time MBA market in aggregate, which is not necessarily a single product. A top 20 full-time MBA program and a regional or unranked program are not the same investment, not the same experiences, and definitely not the same bet if that's the bet that you're choosing to make for your career. The outcome data is not also interchangeable. The recruitment infrastructure is not comparable, and the pure quality is in a different category between those business school programs. So when you see a headline declaring that the MBA is overpriced or obsolete, it is nearly always conflating programs that are structurally different in ways that matter enormously, especially for top 20 business schools. Unless, of course, you're seeing the data that is specifically highlighting the economic impact that has had in the employment of these top-ranked programs, which is, of course, real data to consider and evaluate because business schools don't work with magic. They actually work with the ecosystem of the business environment that we're dealing with day in and day out. So the question this session is built around is a little bit more narrow. It's a little bit more specific than a lot of the generic "is an MBA worth it" kind of think pieces and articles that you hear. So we're focusing on a top 20 program. Under what condition does the investment make sense? And what does a well-framed version of that decision look like in real life? At 4 years experience, the MBA question is primarily about your trajectory. You have enough evidence to know what you're good at and probably enough to know what you'd rather be doing. Not always the case, but a lot of the times. What you don't have is a clear path from here to whatever destination you're looking to embark on. At 6 or 7 years of work experience, the question is slightly different. You may be succeeding by most external measures. The real issue is whether the ceiling that you may be close to experiencing is real, whether the network you have access to is the right one, and whether the credential is going to start mattering in ways it hasn't yet. You're thinking about the long-term plan. But there is also a framing problem that shows up at both stages. Most candidates are thinking too short term. You are not expanding the time frame between where you are now and where you want to be effectively. So a candidate projecting out to where they'll be at 35 is working with a roughly 6 years post-graduation horizon. That is nearly not enough time or not enough runway to evaluate this decision correctly. You have to think, what does your life look like? What is the life that you want to build at 55 and not at 35? And then decide if an MBA makes sense. The MBA is going to shape trajectories that play out for decades, not just this 6 to 10 year out window. And the candidates who get the most out of an MBA are the ones who go in asking what they want to be doing at 55, not what title they'll be doing, but what is the impact that they're looking to make by the time they're 55. And that question produces different school lists, different goal frameworks, and different decisions about timing and is an MBA worth it. At C Admissions, this is where every engagement starts, or it's the beginning of every engagement engagement before we do anything else, before we do school selections, because this is a really important question. You don't want to be moving in a pathway that is not aligned to where you see your future. Every decision you make from now on out should be based on taking poignant steps to where you want to be. I want you to think about employment reports as being designed to present data cleanly, to be more accurate, but they don't present all the minutiae and nuances. So if you look at the employment report, you won't have answers to every single question that you may have. But even with that, some of the numbers that rarely get discussed is the denominator. At MIT Sloan, only 64.6% of the class of 2025 was actively seeking employment. The remaining 35, roughly, were sponsored students returning to their employers, graduates who started their own business at an astounding 11.1% of the class, or candidates continuing education or postponing their search entirely. The placement rate applies to a specific subset of the cohort. That's definitely not a criticism of how the report is constructed. It's a structural feature of how these numbers work, and it applies across programs, not just at MIT Sloan. The candidate whose outcomes appears most visibly in the data are the ones who went through traditional recruiting. The sponsored student recruiting to a consulting firm, the entrepreneur who spent 2 years building a company with MIT's infrastructure behind them, and the career switchers who use the network to enter an industry they couldn't have access before. These are different stories with different ROI calculations that don't aggregate cleanly into a single headline figure. The most interesting data point in the example that we're using, which is MIT Sloan's report, is that 38.4% of graduates cite growth potential as the primary reason for accepting their offer, and only 11.6% cited compensation. So you shouldn't be looking at the numbers alone as salary, and obviously a salary bump from where you are, it's obviously going to have a meaningful impact in your life and your lifestyle, but that's not what students are looking for at these programs. This is a room full of people who were optimizing for impact. And this is important because it tells you something about what a well-executed MBA decisions actually look like in the context of where they're going. And obviously this is data for 2025. We don't have data of like what does the 5-year, 10-year trajectory of their life post-MBA looks like. When candidates describe regretting the MBA, and some do, it usually isn't the program itself that they're describing, unless they're bitter about something they thought it's going to give you. Oftentimes, what they're describing as regret is the clarity that they don't have going in. Two patterns appear with enough consistency to be worth pointing out. The first is that candidates who focus entirely on the immediate post-MBA outcomes, the title, the firm, the salary at graduation. That logic is absolutely understandable because you want the immediate benefits that come as a result of pursuing and investing a significant amount of capital into this education. The next step is the most visible thing. But the MBA is a 2-year experience that shape a trajectory extending far beyond the first role that you have. And candidates who optimize only for the landing of that immediate post-MBA tend to underinvest in the 2 years themselves. The second pattern is the candidates who selects the option that feels most comfortable. The schools where they can see themselves belonging, the industry they know already, the function they've been doing for years. Comfort and fit are not the same thing. I had a client who was admitted to 5 M7 programs and had obviously genuinely strong outcomes with a lot of scholarship and a lot of choices. Her instinct was towards one of the M7s where she felt she belonged. It felt familiar. It felt like she was going to find, quote unquote, her people. The conversation we had that changed her perspective of how she looked at the program was about what the MBA is actually supposed to be doing. It isn't supposed to help you stay comfortable. If you want to grow, if you want to get to the next level, it should make you a little bit uncomfortable. Despite the initial leaning towards another program, she ended up choosing Wharton, where she didn't feel like she belonged, but it gave her the opportunities and the push that she needed to get to the next level of her career. She was challenged in ways she hadn't anticipated when she was in the program, and she grew in ways she hadn't planned for going in. At no point did she regret the decision that she made, which was to pursue a degree at Wharton. Everything covered in this session applies to a room who is considering an MBA. What it doesn't do is answer the question for you specifically, that should you personally do an MBA? The ROI of the MBA isn't a general calculation, and it should never be such. It is a function of your background, your goals, the programs that are realistic within reach or sometimes stretches, and what you do with the 2 years once you're there. That analysis requires looking at your actual materials. If you are in the research phase and want a clear read of where you stand, what's working, what's not working, what needs to be improved, I encourage you to request a profile evaluation. It is something that I personally look at. In addition to getting an immediate sort of score, I look at the actual profile that you submit and give you pros and cons, strengths and weaknesses that you can evaluate. It is written, so I encourage you to submit your resume with it so that I have a full picture of what it is that I'm working with. If you're further along in the phase and decide you want to think through your situation directly, obviously are considering working with a coach, a strategy consultation. This is free, but we want to have conversations with people who are ready to have those kinds of conversations, and those are available as well for the upcoming cycle. Links to both are in the description of the video. The question worth sitting with isn't whether an MBA is worth it in 2026. It's whether this MBA or this version of your career at this point in time is the right move for you and where you want to go. That question definitely has a specific answer, but a unique answer to you specifically. You want to make sure that you're making the right one, not for anyone else, but for you in terms of where you see yourself going from here. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next week.
Hi, I'm Susan Barashai, founder of C Admissions. If you'd like to go deeper into MBA strategy, watch the next video here. And if you want more insights on building a standout application, click here to subscribe.